Hello and welcome to this on-demand series for AWS Educate viewers. This is how to detect, analyze, and compare faces with Amazon Rekognition. My name is Ryan Little. I'm a technical program manager for the AWS Educate team here in EMEA. This and the other series of on-demand and live sessions that we are doing really is for the benefit of our AWS educators on our portal, as well as maybe a few students who are looking to understand what it is that we do a little bit better. And give you some practical experience and application of the 175 plus services that are available in the AWS ecosystem. In this tutorial, you're going to learn about how to use facial recognition features in a service called Amazon Rekognition using the AWS console. Amazon Rekognition is a deep learning based image and video analysis service. So you can imagine maybe even if you're a developer, an aspiring developer, facial recognition and comparison is oftentimes a new challenge you'll face if you are developing an employee verification system, for example, or you need to automate video editing or provide secondary authentication for other applications. And to solve this challenge, you could develop your own machine learning model, maybe even develop an API and even manage your own infrastructure. But what we find and what we found from many of our customers is that this option is oftentimes expensive. It oftentimes requires a lot of advanced knowledge and is time insensitive. So instead of taking that very kind of long and difficult route, you can use a service like Amazon Rekognition, which can detect things like objects, scenes, and faces in an image or video. It can find things like facial landmarks, such as the position of eyes, maybe even detect emotions, such as happiness, sadness, or in near real time or in batches without management of infrastructure or modeling. So in this tutorial, we're going to leverage Amazon Rekognition of a service to do those things, to analyze an image and then compare it to other images to see if the faces match up or if the faces are the same. So you can imagine, as I said, for employee verification, for many offices, many organizations leveraging this type of thing. This tutorial is also going to be a demo of the functionality that's available when using the AWS command line interface or the Rekognition API. And we have a lot of information in regards to leveraging the programmatic interfaces for those environments rather than the Amazon Rekognition console itself. Okay, so that's just a brief introduction to what it is that we're going to do. Before we kick off into my short presentation, I do want to outline kind of a few other kind of assets that we have available that you might find helpful, and then ways in which to navigate for this tutorial. The first thing is that we're going to be leveraging the AWS Educate portal. So I said that this video and many of the videos that we're offering is for our AWS Educate students and educators. So, the hope is that, if you're an educator listening to this, then you want to be leveraging things like the classroom experience for your students. So, inviting students to an environment where they can leverage services like Amazon Rekognition under the kind of the AI service belt of AWS. If you're a student listening, then you'll want to kind of understand how to start building on top of the AWS ecosystem and platform. So leveraging a classroom experience, which I'll walk through in this tutorial. I'll walk through what it's like as a student to be invited to a classroom, in this case, to build on Amazon Rekognition, and how to enter that classroom experience and start building. And all of that is going to be done through the Educate portal. I'm also, for this tutorial, there is a public page for this. If you Google search detect, analyze, and compare faces with Amazon Rekognition, you'll come up to this web-based tutorial. And we're pretty much going to follow this to the letter, more or less. I might go down an avenue or two just to show you a little bit more features of Amazon Rekognition, but you'll get a good sense of what it is and what it can do. But if you're curious and you want to delve even further, we do have a public page for Amazon Rekognition, which gives a nice overview, a very broad and deep listing of all the AI and ML services that we have currently in our ecosystem, features, pricing. I would, if you are, into deep diving, as we say, then check out our FAQ page as well. And you can find the tutorial, this tutorial that I highlighted earlier, actually in the Getting Started Resources tab. If you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see that tutorial down here on the bottom left. So that's going to be kind of our resource material for the day. I will give you a short, brief introduction via PowerPoint on machine learning in general, and a few other key aspects of Rekognition. So to kick off, I do want to introduce, I can't really start talking about Amazon Rekognition without addressing kind of the elephant in the room, which is machine learning and the broad and deep kind of ubiquitous reach of machine learning that we have currently in the market. So if you're leveraging things like watching Netflix, that's leveraging machine learning algorithms. If you're buying something on Amazon, there's machine learning algorithms that fall into the item or items that you buy, and determining the likelihood of other items that you might like to purchase in the future, all the way to accessing hotels, and virtually any aspect of an online experience that you can imagine these days is leveraging machine learning in some fashion. So we'll be introduced to that kind of environment. We'll look a little bit more closely at the Amazon AI ML innovation space. Amazon as a business has been practicing machine learning for the last 20 years. Probably starting in our fulfillment centers, and then building out from there into Amazon Web Services and other areas. So we have things like Prime Air drones that leverage a lot of machine learning technology as well. And then we're going to just briefly look at the AWS machine learning stack. So if it's understanding the frameworks and interfaces, or kind of the platform level of services that are available, oftentimes are managed services, and then the kind of easy out of the box AI services like Amazon Rekognition. We'll be introduced to that. We'll take a closer look at Rekognition via the use cases and features, and then we'll walk through the tutorial that I highlighted earlier on facial comparisons. And then we'll wrap up this session with a brief talk on AWS Educate and kind of how to get started with the portal experience. So let's talk about the reach of machine learning. As I said earlier, you don't really have to go that far back to find out, how new this is. And actually, I said Amazon's been in the business for many, many decades, but it's probably only been in the last 10 or 15 years that we've started to see kind of broader reach across many of our customers in this space. One could say that machine learning went from being kind of an aspirational technology to mainstream extremely, extremely fast. And it's being used whether we know it or not on many levels too. Oftentimes, if you're leveraging things like an application on your phone or in a web browser, under the hood is probably some level of machine learning that's going on. And for a long time, the technology was really limited to a few major tech companies and kind of hardcore academic researchers. But things began to change when kind of cloud computing entered the mainstream. And so compute power and data actually became more available, and quite literally machine learning is now making an impact across every industry that you can imagine. So whether it's finance or retail or fashion, even real estate, we're seeing it, in healthcare, in other areas as well. So it's moving kind of from a peripheral to now a core part of every business and industry. According to the Deloitte Insights State of AI in Enterprise in 2018, 63% of companies are investing to catch up with rivals or narrow their lead. The IDC predicted that by 2021, by next year, global spending on AI and cognitive technologies is actually going to exceed $50 billion in this space. And I said Amazon is actually not new to this environment. As I said, we've been practicing for over 20 years now. So Amazon itself is an example of a company that went through a multi-year kind of machine learning journey in order to be the kind of ML-driven company that you see today. And it did this really by bringing kind of domain and technical experts together to what we call work backwards from a customer problem, and then finding the solution from there. So whether if it's either in the website itself with the machine learning algorithms giving you recommendations, whether it's in the fulfillment centers leveraging machine learning through many of the automated robots that we have, kind of picking and moving products throughout the fulfillment centers. It could be leveraging new technology. So we've developed natural language processing technology to give consumers an entirely new way to interact with technology through Alexa, or it could even be the primary drones that are using robotics in our fulfillment centers to get packages to consumers faster. So we're seeing a lot of interesting kind of places and spaces in which this occurs. And it kind of goes to, again, Amazon and AWS mission of really being customer centric, right? Is to really take our kind of rich experience and expertise with machine learning across Amazon and put it in the hands of everyone effectively. So developer, data scientist, researcher, and we want to make it easy and accessible for anyone of any background. And here's just a sampling of some of the tens of thousands of customers who are leveraging machine learning workloads on top of AWS. We could say actually that more machine learning happens on AWS really than anywhere else, from the largest enterprise through to kind of the hottest startups. AWS has over twice the number of machine learning based public references than any other provider. And companies are working with us to build solutions that are core to their businesses. So in the US, there's a company called C-SPAN. It's a public service that provides things like gavel-to-gavel proceedings of the US House of Representatives and the US Senate. And they're leveraging Amazon Rekognition and being able to tag who is speaking in a given session, who's on camera, down to what time they come on, down to the second. Rekognition allows to use a lot of the index twice as much content as they do currently. So they're currently from 3,500 hours a year down to up to 7,500 hours a year, which allows to index 100% of their of the fun run content. And it was very, very easy for their teams to set up, even with the 97,000 entities from their database. Another company called Ayala Credit provides instant loans to individuals with a verifiable source of income in emerging markets. So being able to use biometric employer and mobile phone data. And also actually leveraging Rekognition for things like identity verification. And then you also see it, of course, in various law enforcement environments. And for example, Marinus Analytics uses Rekognition to identify, locate, and rescue missing persons. Marinus added facial recognition to a number of tools and suites they use to assist law enforcement with different types of missing persons investigations. So those just a sampling of kind of the broad and very rich and deep ecosystem of machine learning on top of AWS. And why people might be thinking about AWS for machine learning. There's a few reasons that I want to highlight here. First is, really AWS is kind of unmatched in the breadth and depth of capability we offer for our customers. We launched over 200 new features and services in the last year, which is quite a fast clip. And our pace is only accelerating. Developers with no prior machine learning experience can easily build sophisticated AI-driven applications, spanning things like computer vision and language and recommendations, many of which are using machine learning technology perfected over the years by Amazon. We have a service called SageMaker, which is doing that. It's putting machine learning into the hands of many developers and data scientists, allowing them to quickly build as well. And so that's another service we're not going to highlight today, but just to be made aware of, we're seeing a lot of traction of that. And before SageMaker, doing machine learning was just too hard for many customers. So by making machine learning easier at a low cost, customers can make better use of their data, which is both valuable and differentiating. And then you see some of the examples there if you're leveraging a service like SageMaker. So being able to have and give customers more than 54% lower total cost of ownership, up to 70% cost reduction in data labeling, up to 90% cost reduction in managed spot training as well. And then finally, being able to get the confidence in building the most comprehensive cloud platform optimized for machine learning. So we often talk about, this idea of being highly secure, reliable, and feature rich in an environment where you can leverage many types of services like compute, storage, database, and others. So we see that as a big differentiator for us. That's why today, if you look at the amount of things like TensorFlow workloads that run in the cloud, 85% of those workloads are running on top of AWS. So I said we'll take just a brief look at our Amazon machine learning stack. So it's really kind of broken down into three tiers here: the ML frameworks and infrastructure, ML services, and AI services. And as I said, we're just going to take a brief look at each of these. And we can think about ML at a macro level as having these three layers of the stack. So at that bottom layer is the frameworks, interfaces, and infrastructure for expert ML practitioners. At the framework layer, there's also three frameworks that are predominantly used. Typically, you'll hear these folks at this level talking about things like TensorFlow or PyTorch or MXNet and creating kind of their own machine learning models and environments leveraging these frameworks. And then very few ML practitioners use only maybe a single framework too. That's an important call out as well. 9 out of 10 machine learning practitioners use more than one in their environments. And then of course in the middle layer are the machine learning services that make it easy for machine learning developers and data scientists to build and train and actually deploy machine learning models in a single click, leveraging a service like SageMaker, for example. And you'll see a whole host of new services that were recently announced at this past reInvent last year. And then in the top layer are those AI services. And that's really going to be our focus today, and one in particular, which is Amazon Rekognition. And when we talk about these AI services at this level, this really allows developers to use pre-trained and auto-trained models to add intelligence to any application without machine learning expertise. The application layer is composed of a handful of lanes where each lane addresses particular solutions in machine learning, like vision, but we also have speech and other capabilities, even text capability to infer emotional sentiment in text, for example. So you don't need to understand machine learning to use these ML services. It's really open to any and everyone. Okay, so taking a closer look at Amazon Rekognition. We said earlier that that's the kind of AI-led service in the stack. It makes it easy to add image and video analysis to your applications. So you really just provide an image or video to the Amazon Rekognition API, which we'll do in the tutorial. And the service can identify objects, people, text, scenes, and activities, as well as detect any kind of anything that maybe shouldn't be there, or you want to kind of hide or blur as well. Amazon Rekognition also provides highly accurate facial analysis, facial recognition, even with live stream video. And you can detect and analyze and compare faces, which is really the form and function of our tutorial here. So here in this scene, you can identify that Rekognition identifies that there's a person, a rock, and maybe even a landscape to detect where this environment is. So all sorts of things. And of course, not only that, you can see a number of different feature-rich capabilities that are kind of embedded with Amazon Rekognition. So things like face search or text and image celebrity recognition, which is leveraging another capability via IMDb, so being able to pull celebrities' faces and see who is in that particular photo. We talked about pathing earlier, so following the path of an individual, particularly if you have video, you see that quite a bit. So if you can think of like for sporting events and things like this, to find out the path of a player that they used for making a goal, for example. So we'll look at some of these features in our tutorial. I do want to highlight just a few use cases and features as we go. The first is this idea of kind of media discovery. So whether it's live events like the World Cup or Super Bowl or maybe even the Olympics, you can imagine being able to watch and infer and get kind of feature-rich analytics from events in real time. It could be maybe if you're watching things like Prime Video and looking at those media libraries and pulling out maybe particular celebrities in that movie or TV show that you're watching. We're also seeing it in social media and as well as influencer marketing. So being able to find out as and when consumers use products and services, what they're saying, what they're writing about it, even if they're taking pictures, and seeing how you can leverage recognition in those environments and get some feedback as far as what your consumers think about those environments. So we talk about the who, the what, and the where for media discovery. So whether we saw this actually with the Prince's Wedding not that long ago, which leveraged Amazon Rekognition in its environments. The labeling and activities that it does, so identifying a collection of objects, so maybe like a ball and a net, and inferring that this is some sort of sporting event, and even inferring a little bit further and saying that this looks like maybe a football or soccer event. And then location, looking at scenes, looking at text, and inferring where a given city that photo is from, or a certain kind of location. So I mentioned celebrity detection. So that's being able to leverage famous actors, as you can see. So well-known people in video and images, and being able to leverage that as a service. We'll play around with that a little bit later as well. Object and scene detection, so pulling out those labels and objects from an image. It will provide, Amazon Rekognition provides what's called a confidence score. So it'll give you the kind of the confidence, if you will, or the likelihood that it sees a human in this photo, or that it sees what it thinks is a skateboard in this photo. And it does that through there's the confidence score there, as you see. And it's able to isolate different objects and images in a given scene and tell you who or what, or the likelihood of who or what is there. It uses a concept called bounding boxes to be able to specify the location of maybe objects or people in this space. So you'll see that as leveraged in an example as well as we move forward. We talked about understanding activities and paths. So again, inferring that this is a sporting event of some sort. We see a collection of players, we see a ball, and understanding what this means. And even this idea of pulling out kind of random text in the wild. So you can imagine maybe if you're taking a video and you want to pull some text out of that video that you see, you can extract that vis-a-vis the Rekognition API or the video API in that space, and pull out things like layouts and fonts and different styles as well. But for our focuses, it's really about understanding kind of facial comparisons. And we said kind of the use case for this, typically we see for things like employee verification, If you're a company that wants to be able to better understand your customers, you can see maybe to having a service like this to maybe recognize your customers to better understand their needs. So you'll hear this term kind of personalization come up quite a bit in machine learning spaces. Understanding trends of customers, so what their maybe shopping habits, what they're doing, what do they like, what don't they like, those types of things become really valuable information. And you see here, they will play around with a kind of a facial comparison component, being able to identify an individual and say, does this look like, or what's the likelihood or confidence score that this is the individual that's being represented. And some interesting kind of facial analysis here. So again, understanding the trends of a collection of individuals. So looking at whether they're wearing glasses, for example, or not, whether they're doing some sort of an activity like driving or reading a book, for example. Even being able to detect things like emotional sentiment, right? Or detecting emotions. What's the likelihood that they're happy or sad? So you can imagine maybe even taking a photo of maybe a friend of yours and the photo telling you that emotional sentiment of that individual, or even extrapolating that to a large audience and getting emotional sentiment from an audience. Also, all sorts of interesting kind of capabilities that are in place here. So now, after that brief introduction to kind of machine learning and Amazon Rekognition, we're going to delve into the tutorial itself. As I mentioned, this is publicly available, and you can follow along in the tutorial. But I'll make sure I'll drop a link in this space as well. We're going to leverage the tutorial vis-a-vis the AWS Educate console. And we're actually going to get started through there. So you log into your console. Again, if you're an educator and you've created a classroom for your students, you're assigning this type of activity, this facial detection assignment, if you will, to your students. This is how your students would access AWS console and complete the assignment. So as a student, I go up to my classrooms. I can access it from the top or down here at the bottom. And I've been given an AWS Educate Classroom link that I can go to. I have some other links that I've been given from other educators as well. And one of the first steps is to either accept or decline that link. And then once you accept it, you'll see this kind of blue link that pops up to go to the classroom. So that's what I'm going to do here. And I'll continue on. We're actually being redirected to a third-party site called Vocarium, which hosts many of the lab environments for these classrooms. And as a student, I have a predefined amount of credit that's been given to me by the instructor. And this is what I'm using for the duration of the classroom. And so the steps to create a classroom and outline the number of credits are outlined in the AWS Educate portal. And if you have any just general questions about AWS Educate accounts, you can find them here on the left. So as a student, I'm going to access the AWS console, Management Console, and I'm going to be redirected to the home page. You'll see here I'm automatically logged in as a user vis-a-vis the classroom that was created for me. And here I'm operating in the region of Northern Virginia, or US East 1. This is where all learnings are done on AWS Educate. We do have actually 22 regions globally for Amazon Web Services, but for AWS Educate, all learnings are done through this region. So make sure your students stay in that region. If they venture out elsewhere, they more than likely will get some sort of access denied, or they won't be able to access certain services. So very important. You'll see in this region, we have a drop down of all services that I can access here. We're going to be playing largely with the machine learning space, which is, you'll see a selection of services here. We're looking for Amazon Rekognition. So I could click on it here, or I could find it in my recently visited, or just type in a few key values here to be redirected to that service. Okay, and